Thank you, Mr. President. So when we finish this period of morning business, which is open to speeches and statements on many different topics, we will then go to the defense authorization bill. Our process in the Senate is to authorize spending and then to appropriate the money for the actual spending. Occasionally those two things are in sync, but many times they are not. I'm afraid what we face today is uncertainty. Senator McCain, who is the chairman of the Defense Authorization Committee, will bring his proposal to the floor, but it's at a spending level which is not allowed by current law. The Budget Control Act will not allow Senator McCain or the Senate to spend at the level that he wants to spend. I can make good argument that the statutory level that we're required to hold to is inadequate to our national defense, but if we're honest about taking care of the problem, we not only have to pass this authorization bill, we've got to change the Budget Control Act so that we can put more money into our national defense. That debate will get started this week. It is near and dear to Senator McCain's heart. He works hard on it each year with Senator Jack Reed, a Democrat of Rhode Island, and there'll be many amendments, I'm sure, considered during the course of this week on defense authorization. But what I come to the floor to speak to under morning business is not that issue. It is the issue of DACA and Dreamers. And it was just 6 days ago that the announcement by the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, was made that he was going to rescind the DACA program. A quick history. 16 years ago, I introduced a bill called the DREAM Act. And the DREAM Act was written to take care of young people brought to the United States as infants and toddlers and young boys and girls by their parents who grew up in this country, didn't get in trouble with the law, went and finished school, and always thought that they were going to be Americans, that they'd use their education and their skills to build a life in this country. However, because their parents either came here undocumented or didn't file the appropriate papers, these young people are literally without a country. The country they've grown up in does not accept them under the law. So 16 years ago, I introduced the DREAM Act and said, let's take care of this problem. These young people, through no fault of their own, should be given a chance to stay in this country and be part of its future. I've passed it in the Senate. I've seen it passed in the House. We've never quite been able to bring it together in any 1 year and pass both chambers. And so it is not the law of the land. 16 years ago, I introduced it. It is still not the law of the land. In the meantime, Senator Obama, my colleague in the Senate, co-sponsored the DREAM Act and then got a promotion. And as President of the United States, I asked him, can you do something to protect these young people from being deported? And he said he would. So he created, by executive order, something known as DACA, a DACA program where young people come forward, turn themselves in, register with the United States, pay a filing fee to cover all the costs of the process, and go through a criminal background check. And if they are approved and cleared, then for 2 years they can stay in the United States without fear of being deported, and they're allowed to work. Then 2 years later, it's renewable. Well, over the years since President Obama did that, 780,000 young people signed up, went through the background check, and were approved under DACA. Last week, President Trump announced through his Attorney General that he was going to rescind the DACA program. So the 780,000 young people have their future in doubt. They don't know which way they're going to turn. This creates serious problems, as you might imagine. The young people who were affected by it were affected emotionally. I would be too, because they don't know what's going to happen next. They don't know if they're going to be allowed to stay in this country, deported from this country, whether they can work legally or not work. They're waiting for Congress to give the answer. And the president says he's waiting for Congress to give the answer. Last Friday, I went back to Chicago, which I'm honored to represent in the Senate, and I visited Loyola University's School of Medicine. It's known as the Stritch School of Medicine. And let me say at the outset how proud I am to represent the city and especially to represent Loyola University. Here's what they did in their medical school when President Obama created DACA. They said, we will open up competition for our medical school to include those who are protected by DACA. We won't give them special slots. We won't give them a quota. They can compete with everybody else who wants to go to our medical school. And so you know what happened? At the end of the day, 32 of those DACA applicants scored so highly that they were accepted at Loyola Medical School. They're now in 2 or 3 different years of classes. It's amazing. For many of them, from all over the United States, they grew up without legal citizenship status, always dreaming of being doctors, and it was just impossible. They knew that no medical school would accept them. And here Loyola said, we will accept you. And they got their chance, 32 of them. Now there's more to the story. These young people do not qualify for any government assistance from the federal government. Because they're undocumented, they don't qualify for Pell Grants, they don't qualify for federal government loans. Medical school is expensive. How are they going to do it? They work their way through college by paying out of their own pocket and working jobs. How are they going to do medical school? Well, our state of Illinois, under Governor Pat Quinn, renewed under Governor Rauner, created a loan program for them where they could borrow money from the state. But there was a catch. For every year they borrowed money to go to medical school at Loyola, they had to pledge that they would give 1 year of service of their lives as doctors in underserved communities in our state. They did it. 32 of them signed up for it. And I'm really proud to say the program has been a terrific success in our state. They're just extraordinary, along with the other students at the medical school. They're special people, and they come from all over the world, and they're all in this similar predicament. But until last week, they were protected by DACA. Now, what happens when you take away the DACA executive order, which President Trump said he will do over the next 6 months? There's a special challenge here. After you finish 4 years of medical school, these students apply for residencies, where they pursue their specialties, whatever they might be. A residency is a work experience for all these medical students. They'll be working as residents through some university, at a hospital, working long, long hours, pursuing their dream of being doctors as well as specialists. Here's the problem. With DACA gone, they no longer have the legal right to work in the United States. So what does it mean? They can't apply for residencies. This is the end of it, the end of their medical education. It stops right there. Whatever their ambition might be, whether it's surgery or psychiatry, whatever it might be, they can't go forward without DACA. So it really puts a burden on us, doesn't it, in Congress to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to pass a law which finally, once and for all, defines the status, the legal status of these young people? Not just for these medical students, but for hundreds of thousands of others who are working. They're engineers, they're teachers. They're working in so many different areas, and they want to continue being part of this country. I'm encouraged that we have a bipartisan response. My colleague, Senator Lindsey Graham, a Republican of South Carolina, is my lead co-sponsor on the DREAM Act, this year's version of the DREAM Act. We currently have 3 other Republican senators who have joined as co-sponsors from across the United States. Senator Murkowski of Alaska, Senator Flake of Arizona, and Senator Gardner of Colorado. We hope that others will join them. If we get the critical 60 votes in the Senate, 60 sponsors or 60 who will pledge to vote for it, we can pass the DREAM Act once and for all and take care of the concerns of the medical students I mentioned and so many others across this country. I've come to the floor over the last few years and told the stories of the dreamers. These stories, I think, really have created good impressions in people's minds about who these young people are and what they can do for the future of the United States. I'd like to do that again today. This is Harminder Saini. Harminder was 6 years old when his family moved to the United States from India. He grew up in Queens and New York City. He was a typical American kid, played sports, went to the park every day. Harminder's dream was to serve his country as a soldier in the United States Army. In his words, he simply wanted to give back. Harminder was a born leader. And in high school, he was active in student government, ultimately elected class president. He first learned that he didn't have legal immigration status when he was in high school and he couldn't get a driver's license. And they explained to him, you don't have the necessary legal documentation to be in this country. Brought here as a kid, now growing up. He's now a student at Hunter College at the City University of New York, working toward his bachelor's degree in history. Thanks to DACA, he's fulfilling his dream. Last year, he was able to enlist in the Army through the Military Accessions Vital to National Interest program known as MAVNI. This photo is from his enlistment ceremony. The MAVNI program allows immigrants with skills that are vital to our national interest to enlist in the armed forces. More than 800 DACA recipients, the people I described earlier, with these skills have joined America's military. They really want to be part of our country. Now, some Trump administration officials have claimed that DACA recipients are taking away jobs from Americans. But Harminder and hundreds just like him have skills that our military couldn't find in the general population that they were recruiting. Harminder, along with many other dreamers, is now waiting to ship out for basic training. He continues his undergraduate studies and is working full-time while waiting for a chance to volunteer to serve America in the military. He said, and I quote him, "All I want to do is serve. I want to do my part to give back to this country because it allowed me to serve." Harminder and other dreamers have so much to give to America. But without DACA, without the DREAM Act, Harminder and hundreds of other immigrants with skills that are really important to our national interest will have to leave the Army. They want nothing more than to serve our country. They're prepared to die for our country. What more can we ask? But instead, there are those who would say they should leave. They should be deported. One of the president's former staff advisors on a 60 Minutes show last night said those exact words. They should just leave. I don't think America would be a stronger country if Harminder left. I don't think our military would be stronger without his contribution, service to our country. He should be part of America, and we can do something about it. A friend of mine recently went to University of Notre Dame to visit with the administration there, represented by the presiding officer in the state of Indiana. It's my understanding they have some 68 DACA recipients at Notre Dame University. There's hardly a university in this country that doesn't have DACA-eligible young people who are going to school there. And remember, they don't qualify for any federal assistance to education at all because they are in an undocumented status. But they're working their way through, they're borrowing the money, they're working jobs to make sure they reach a point where they have a future. And now it's up to us. We have to decide what we're going to do. Senator Graham, my co-sponsor of the DREAM Act, said a week or so ago when we introduced it that the moment of reckoning is coming. That moment is not only coming, it arrived last Tuesday. We need Republican leaders to join us and help make the DREAM Act the law of the land. Otherwise, what will happen to these young people? As for this United States Senator, I've made this a major part of my public career. I feel a special kinship to these young people. Yesterday was Mexican Independence Day in Chicago. What a parade. It must have gone on for 2 miles. It felt like it. And more people than you could imagine coming out there with their families. People of Mexican heritage who are now part of Chicago, part of Illinois, and part of the United States. As I was marching down the street, there was a young lady and a couple of her friends walking next to me, wearing princess crowns, and I started talking to them. It turned out 2 of the young girls were born in the United States. The third was born in Mexico, and she was a DACA recipient. She was going to school. She thanked me for the DACA program and said, "I hope you can make it a reality again." Well, we have that obligation. We have that responsibility. We need to step up with this broken immigration system and make certain that at the end of the day, we've done everything in our power to give these young people, like Harminder, and hundreds of thousands just like him, a chance to be part of America's future. Mr. President, let me just close with a brief statement. I listened to my colleague and friend, Senator Schumer, speak in very touching terms about this anniversary, which we observe today, the 16th anniversary of 9/11. I could recount where I was and what I remember as I have before on the floor, but I won't. I will just say that it changed America in so many different ways. As I went through airport security this morning at O'Hare, which I do every single week, I thought to myself, 16 years ago, it would have been unthinkable that we would put passengers, every single one of them, through this kind of security process. But that is a reality of life in a world that is dangerous. Life in a world where we want to protect innocent people from the 9/11s of the future, which are being plotted and planned by our enemies around the world. I think of those whose lives were lost on 9/11. I think of those who risked their lives. I think of those whose lives will never be the same because of that day. It is a reminder to all of us to thank God that we live in this great country, to remember our history well, to honor the men and women in the military and the men and women in law enforcement and in medicine who stepped up that day in a heroic way, and to make sure that we do everything in our generation so that no future generation has a similar experience. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.